Barcelona's training grounds had always been a sanctuary for Lionel Messi, even long after he'd moved on from the club. On this particular autumn evening, as the Mediterranean breeze carried the salt of the sea across the empty facility, the Argentine maestro found himself drawn back to these familiar grounds. At 37, his playing days were behind him, but his love for the beautiful game burned as bright as ever. The security guard had recognized him immediately. One doesn't forget the face of a legend, and with a knowing nod, let him wander the grounds in peace. Messi walked slowly, hands in the pockets of his simple black jacket, taking in the sight of La Masia's training pitches, where dreams had been born for generations. If you're enjoying this story, consider subscribing for more tales of inspiration in football. Your support helps us share these important messages. As twilight settled over Barcelona, Messi noticed he wasn't alone. On the furthest pitch, a local youth team was holding trials. Something about the scene caught his attention. Perhaps it was the way the floodlights cast long shadows across the grass, or maybe it was the familiar nervous energy of young players chasing their dreams. Among them stood a young man who seemed different from the rest. He moved with a natural grace that reminded Messi of his own early days. But there was something else, a hunger in his eyes that spoke of battles fought off the pitch. The player, Messi would later learn, was James Williams, a 19-year-old from London who had spent every penny he had to make this trial. The head coach, Xavier Ruiz, was a man Messi knew by reputation rather than acquaintance. A former third-division player who had never quite made it, Ruiz had developed a reputation for being old school, euphemism that often masked darker prejudices. As Messi watched from the shadows of the stands, he saw James approach Ruiz with a confidence that belied his circumstances. "Sir, I've traveled from London for this trial. I've played academy football in England, and I believe I can contribute to your team." Ruiz's response made Messi's blood run cold. The coach's dismissal wasn't just immediate. It was cruel, laced with thinly veiled racial undertones that had no place in football or anywhere else. "We don't need your type here," Ruiz sneered, emphasizing type in a way that made his meaning unmistakable. A reminder to our new readers: subscribe this story to see how one moment of courage can change lives forever. The other players shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, others pretending not to hear. But James stood his ground, dignity intact despite the humiliation. "Sir, just give me 5 minutes on the pitch. That's all I ask." "Security!" Ruiz barked, his face twisted with disdain. "Show this one out, and make sure they know at the gate not to let him back in." It was then that Messi felt something he hadn't experienced since his playing days, that surge of adrenaline before a decisive moment. He had always been known as the quiet one, the player who let his feet do the talking. But sometimes, silence is a luxury the conscience cannot afford. He emerged from the shadows, walking slowly but purposefully toward the group. The floodlights caught his face, and a ripple of recognition spread across the pitch. Players stopped mid-drill, balls dropped from suddenly lifeless hands, and even Ruiz's face lost its sneer, replaced by an expression of shock. "I've been watching," Messi said quietly, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. His Spanish was perfect, but he chose to speak in English for James's benefit. "I've seen enough to know that you're making a terrible mistake, Señor Ruiz." Ruiz stammered, his previous bravado evaporating. "Señor Messi, we have protocols. Standards." "Standards?" Messi's smile was gentle, but his eyes were hard. "I remember when people said I didn't meet the standards. Too small, they said. Not strong enough." He turned to James. "Show me what you can do, kid." For the next 15 minutes, as the sun set completely over Barcelona, James Williams played the football of his life. Messi stood on the sideline, watching intently as the young man demonstrated a technical ability that spoke of countless hours of practice, of devotion to the craft despite every obstacle. "You see it, don't you?" Messi finally said to Ruiz, who had grown increasingly pale. "You see what your standards almost threw away." The night was about to take an unexpected turn, as Messi made a decision that would change not just James's life, but the future of football itself. As he pulled out his phone to make a call, the warm glow of the stadium lights seemed to promise that sometimes, in the darkest moments, hope arrives wearing the most unexpected faces. Dawn broke over Barcelona's coastline, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. On a private training pitch, two figures were already hard at work. James Williams, drenched in sweat, was weaving through a complex array of cones, the ball seemingly glued to his feet. Behind him, Lionel Messi watched with the focused intensity of a master craftsman. "Again," Messi said softly. There was no need to raise his voice. James had quickly learned that Messi's quiet commands carried more weight than any shouted instruction. The days following that fateful evening at La Masia had been a whirlwind. Messi hadn't just offered James a chance. He had offered him a complete rebirth as a footballer. Using his connections, he'd arranged for James to stay in Barcelona and train under his personal guidance. The condition? Complete dedication. Football, Messi had told him during their first proper session, is not just what you do. It must become who you are. Not for fame, not for money, but for love of the game itself. The training regime was unlike anything James had imagined. While other young players might have expected flashy skill drills and spectacular shooting practice, Messi's approach was fundamentally different. They spent entire days on the basics: first touch, ball control, body positioning. Hours were dedicated to simply receiving the ball properly. "Watch how the ball rolls," Messi would say, demonstrating the subtle art of reading spin and trajectory. "Feel its rhythm. The ball should be a part of you, not something you fight against." During their breaks, they would sit in the shade, sharing mate, the traditional South American tea that Messi always carried with him. These moments became as valuable as the training itself. Messi would share stories of his own struggles, not just with football but with life's bigger challenges. "You know," Messi said one afternoon, stirring his mate thoughtfully, "when I was young, many people thought I couldn't make it, not just because of my size, but because I was different. They didn't understand that being different is not a weakness. It's a gift." James absorbed everything, not just the football lessons, but the philosophy behind them. He learned that Messi's genius wasn't just in his skills, but in his approach to the game and to life itself. Your support means everything. Subscribe for more insights into the beautiful game and its power to change lives. The transformation wasn't easy. There were days when James's body screamed for rest, when the technical demands seemed impossible. But Messi had a way of pushing him beyond his limits without breaking his spirit. "Frustration," Messi explained during a particularly challenging session, "is just your old self resisting your new self. Embrace it. Learn from it." As weeks turned into months, James began to change. It wasn't just his technique that improved. His entire understanding of football evolved. Messi taught him to see the game in patterns, to read spaces before they opened, to think 3 moves ahead while staying present in the moment. The training sessions often attracted small crowds, other players, coaches, even tourists who'd somehow heard that Messi was coaching. But Messi kept James focused, shielding him from distractions while teaching him to play under observation. "Let them watch," Messi would say. "But remember, you're not performing for them. You're expressing yourself through football. There's a difference." 6 months into their journey, something remarkable happened. During a practice match against Barcelona's youth team, arranged by Messi to test James's progress, James scored a goal that made even the seasoned coaches gasp. It wasn't just the technical execution. It was the vision, the awareness, the almost telepathic understanding of space and time. Messi, watching from the sideline, allowed himself a small smile. The butterfly was emerging from its cocoon. That evening, as they sat in Messi's private gym reviewing footage, the Argentine maestro turned to his protege. "Tomorrow," he said, "we begin the next phase." James looked up, curious. He'd learned that when Messi spoke like this, something significant was coming. "You've mastered the physical aspects," Messi continued. "Now we must work on something more important, your mind. The greatest battles in football are not won with your feet, but with your head." The mental training was unlike anything James had experienced. Messi taught him meditation techniques, visualization exercises, and most importantly, how to maintain composure under pressure. They spent hours analyzing not just game situations, but human psychology. How to read opponents, how to understand their fears and intentions. Football is a language, Messi explained. When you truly understand it, you can speak to millions without saying a word. One day, during a particularly intense training session, Messi arranged for a surprise. He had invited Xavier Ruiz, the coach who had rejected James, to observe their training. Ruiz sat in the stands, watching with wide eyes as James demonstrated a level of skill that would have been unimaginable months ago. After the session, Ruiz approached them, his face a mask of regret. But before he could speak, James did something unexpected. He extended his hand. "Thank you," James said simply. Ruiz looked confused. "For what?" "For giving me the chance to meet my mentor," James replied, glancing at Messi. Messi watched this exchange with approval. The lesson in forgiveness hadn't been part of any training plan, but it showed that James had grown not just as a player, but as a human being. The transformation continued, day by day, drill by drill. James learned to play in Messi's image while maintaining his own identity. He developed a style that combined Messi's technical precision with his own natural athleticism. But more than that, he developed the mentality of a champion. 9 months after that fateful evening at La Masia, James was ready. Messi had arranged for scouts from several top clubs to watch him play in a specially arranged showcase match. As they warmed up together for the last time as mentor and student, Messi shared one final piece of wisdom. "Today, you will show them what you can do," he said. "But remember, the real victory isn't in proving them wrong. It's in proving yourself right." What happened next would become football legend, as James Williams stepped onto the pitch not just as a player, but as a symbol of perseverance, of dignity, and of the transformative power of believing in someone when no one else would. The sun was setting over Barcelona, just as it had on that first evening. But now, as James prepared to show the world what he had become, the shadows seemed to retreat before him, and the future stretched out bright and limitless before his feet. The Camp Nou stood silent, holding its breath. James Williams, now wearing Barcelona's iconic number 10 shirt, stood over a free kick in the 89th minute of the Champions League final. The score was tied 1-1. In the VIP box, Lionel Messi watched intently, his expression serene despite the magnitude of the moment. The journey to this moment had been extraordinary. After that showcase match 9 months into his training with Messi, James had signed with Barcelona, a decision that raised eyebrows initially but would soon prove prophetic. The same board that had witnessed his rejection at La Masia now welcomed him as their future. His debut season had been nothing short of revolutionary. James played with a style that seemed to merge Messi's technical brilliance with his own unique attributes. He wasn't trying to be the next Messi. He was writing his own chapter in football's grand story. Football, Messi had told him before his first professional match, is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming the truest version of yourself. The statistics told one story: 38 goals and 22 assists in his first season. But the numbers couldn't capture the artistry, the joy, the sheer beauty of how James played the game. He made football look like both a science and an art, just as his mentor had done for so many years. Now, as he stood over the ball in the Champions League final, everything had come full circle. The world watched as James took 3 steps back, just as Messi had taught him. His breathing was controlled, his focus absolute. The whistle blew. The ball sailed over the wall, dipping and swerving with impossible precision, before nestling in the top corner. The stadium exploded. Barcelona had won their 6th Champions League title, and James Williams had written his name into football history. Your support helps us share these stories of triumph and inspiration. Subscribe for more. But the real victory came 3 days later, in a small ceremony at La Masia. Barcelona had decided to open a new academy program specifically focused on providing opportunities to overlooked talent. The person they chose to run it? Xavier Ruiz. It had been James's idea, supported wholeheartedly by Messi. Ruiz, who had spent the past 2 years watching James's rise with a mixture of regret and amazement, broke down in tears when they offered him the position. "I don't deserve this chance," Ruiz said during the ceremony, his voice thick with emotion. "Not after what I did." "Everyone deserves a second chance," James replied, echoing words Messi had once shared with him. "The beautiful game becomes even more beautiful when we open its doors to everyone." The academy became known as the Second Chance program, and within 5 years, it had produced dozens of professional players from diverse backgrounds. Each success story was another brick in the wall of change, another step toward a more inclusive future for football. Messi remained involved, though largely in the background. He preferred to watch from the shadows, just as he had on that fateful evening years ago. But his influence was everywhere, in the training methods, in the philosophy, and most importantly, in the belief that talent knows no boundaries. This story reminds us that change is possible when we choose to be part of it. Share if you agree. 10 years after that first meeting, James had become not just a football star, but a symbol of transformation. He had won every major trophy, but his greatest achievement wasn't measured in silverware. It was measured in the lives he'd touched, the barriers he'd broken, and the dreams he'd inspired. During his Ballon d'Or acceptance speech, his third in 4 years, James told the story of that evening at Masia. He spoke about Ruiz's rejection, about Messi's intervention, about the journey that followed. But most importantly, he spoke about the future. "Football isn't just about what happens on the pitch," he said, holding the golden trophy. "It's about the stories we tell, the barriers we break, and the dreams we dare to chase. This award isn't just mine. It belongs to every kid who's ever been told they don't belong. You belong. You've always belonged." In the audience, Messi smiled that same quiet smile he'd worn throughout their journey together. He knew that what they'd built was bigger than football. It was a legacy of hope, a testament to the power of belief, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories are won not by defeating others, but by lifting them up. Ruiz's academy program eventually spread across Europe, then globally. The ripple effect was immeasurable. Thousands of young players who might have been overlooked were now getting their chance to shine. The beautiful game was becoming more beautiful with each passing season. As for James and Messi, their relationship evolved from mentor and student to partners in a mission bigger than themselves. They worked together to establish foundations, create opportunities, and ensure that what happened at La Masia that evening would never happen again. Thank you for following this journey. Share this story if you believe in the power of second chances. Years later, when asked about his greatest achievement, James wouldn't mention his trophies or records. Instead, he would talk about a young player from a small village in Africa who had come through their academy program and was now playing for Barcelona's first team. "That's the real victory," he would say, sharing a knowing look with Messi. Not changing the game, but changing what's possible within it. And so the story continues, not just through James and Messi, but through every player who finds their chance, every coach who learns to look beyond prejudice, and every fan who understands that football's greatest power lies not in what it is, but in what it can become. The beautiful game had become more beautiful indeed.